The liquidation preference. The liquidation preference is part of the term sheet and later on of the venture capital deal, and is an economic term because it affects how the deal works economically for the VC and also yourself as the founder. So this is especially important when there is an exit happening or a change of control in general, and not really a liquidation of a company. In some languages, it might seem like the company is going bankrupt and then there are some preferences. No, this is not what it is. It is about a change of control. And in this case, VCs love to have special contractual details, and these details are explained on that chart. The liquidation preference comes into place when a liquidity event or a change of control happens among the owners of the company and basically determines, and that's the second part, who will get the money back first. We'll have an example later on which explains how it works in a contract. Basically, first of all, what you have to keep in mind is if you have something like that, and normally formulation in the contract is in these cases, and then you see the cases where it could happen, like change of control, going public or whatever. The VC gets certain rights, and these certain rights in most cases means they get money first, and afterwards the remaining part is distributed amongst all the other shareholders. Why is that? It should protect investors, especially from losing money in case of a drop of valuation, and ensure a minimum return for the fund. And it's quite common in contracts today. You find 1 times up to 3 times liquidation preferences, which are often get invalid after a certain minimum of cash multiple. So why is that in general? And I said at the very beginning when we started with the term sheets that in my own case in 1999, when I started my first internet company, we didn't have a liquidation preference in the contract. But in 2001, when we did another financing round, we had a liquidation preference in the contract. And there you can easily see how contracts change overnight. What happened in between? Well, the new economy bubble bursted in between, and companies which were really well financed in 1999 were sold in 2000 for a fraction of the valuation of 1999. So imagine a VC puts in 10 million into a company and says, okay, it's a 50 million valuation, so the founders have 80% and the VC has 20%. Now someone comes up and says, why don't you sell this company for 5 million? What happens to those founders? The economy is down, the internet bubble bursted, nobody really cares about internet companies, and someone comes up, give me your company for 5 million? You say, yes, cool, I still own 4 million. Then I'll be comparably rich. The VC gets 1 million. He puts in 10 million before. VCs don't want that. And that's clearly understandable. They want to align interest again. They want to have at least a minimum return for their investments. They want to prevent you from walking away too early. Moral hazard again. And this is why they put a liquidation preference into the contract and say, okay, if the company is sold, I get 10 million first, and then the remaining parts will distribute it. So if you sell the company for 5 million, I get all the money, you get nothing. Then entrepreneurs start thinking. And this is especially what happened between 1999 and 2001 in the new economy. And this is how liquidation preference came up. It's normally split into 2 parts. The one part is the preference, So that determines who will get what amount before participation, and the participation, which is a later stage, it determines how the rest of the money is being split amongst all the other shareholders. Before we look into an example, again, theory helps you to understand it. Align interest, prevent moral hazard, prevents entrepreneurs from walking away too easily, go through hard times, try to work on your company value, try to bring it up again, and it can happen. And also the fund structure, because VC funds, they have their fund, they have to bring a minimum return to the investors, and they like to secure that. And this is, by the way, also helpful in order to understand, negotiate the whole liquidation preference. Because what you can say is, if we align interest and you don't want me to walk away too early, in the case of I make a lot of money, 100 million valuation to this company, why should you get a preference? Because we all made money. And this is how it's reflected in contracts. Nowadays, it might change in the future. Now let's look at an example. Start with this company. What are the terms of this company? A venture capitalist, again, he invests 2 million money, 6 million pre-money valuation, so total valuation post-money is 8 million. The 2 million is 25% shares of the company. They negotiate a single liquidation preference. You see that over here, which becomes invalid after 80 million exit valuation, which is a multiple of 10. So the VC basically says, okay, 10 times the money, I'm happy. Nowadays, can you expect? You can expect 5 times to 7 times within a 3 to 5 year period. So this is also how to negotiate that. Again, how do you get to the invalid amount? If you say, okay, if you want 5 times the money, if you reach 5 times the money, no liquidation preference is necessary anymore. Let's get back to the example. Scenario 1. This company is sold for 10 million shortly afterwards. What's the liquidation preference doing? So without liquidation preference, if the company is sold for 10, the VC gets his 25%, equaling 2.5 million. You get your 75%, equaling 7.5 million. That's the distribution. But you agreed on a single liquidation preference. Means the VC gets 2 million up front, 2, and the remaining 8 million, that's the participation, is distributed according to the shares, which means 25 for the VC. Again, 25 from 8 million is another 2 over here, and that adds up to the 4 million you can see here. And you, as the entrepreneur, get the remaining 6. You see the economic consequences? This is why it is important, again, to understand the liquidation preference. Because now you end up with less money, 1.5 million less for you as the entrepreneur. And you only have a single liquidation preference. If you have a 3 times liquidation preference, the VC gets 6 up front. The remaining 4 will distribute it 75%, 25, so another million for the VC means 7 for the VC, only 3 for you. Compared to the 7.5 in the case without liquidation preference, that's important in economic terms. Even more important it gets if your company should be sold for 2 million. So that's a down round. Someone comes up and says, well, the company is not really working well, but I'm going to take it for 2 million. What happens then? If you don't have liquidation preference, you get your 1.5, which equals the 75% you have. If you have that single or double or triple, whatever liquidation preference, the VC basically gets gets it all because he gets 2 million up front, which is the preference, and there's nothing left for a participation. Now you see that's economically very important to understand it, especially in those situations. And then entrepreneurs start thinking, if my company doesn't go too well, maybe I have to change something and get back to the path of success and have a higher value later on, because then it also pays out for me as an entrepreneur. And that's the third case, the scenario number 3. The company is sold for 100 million. That's a jackpot for both of you, because the VC makes a lot of money, you make a lot of money. Without liquidation preference, 75% or 75 million in that case for you, 25 for the VC. And with liquidation preference, same thing, because liquidation preference becomes invalid. And it's fair to say that, because the VC makes even more than 10 times the money, and then it's fair to say, okay, you had your share and you were successful too. That's sometimes not the argumentation of professional, especially US-based VCs. They are always looking for the big exits, and they want to force, to some extent, the founders to those big exits. So whenever they give you like 10, 15, 20 million for your company, they sometimes say, I want to triple liquidation preference. So I want 60 million up front before the participation takes place. This, you might say this on the one hand is because they are very greedy. Can't say that for real, but it's possible. But on the other hand, what they basically want you to do is really push the value of your company, really build a very, very valuable company that even if you have a 60 million liquidation preference in your company, if you sell it for 500, a billion or 2 billion or even 19 billion of WhatsApp, the 60 million get quite marginal. And this is their way of approaching entrepreneurs. This is the way of making really big, successful deals. However, we have to admit that in many cases, it doesn't come true. In many cases, it's scenario 1 or 2. So keep in mind, in both scenarios, even if you have 75% of your company, you don't end up economically with the 75%, but less, much less in a down round.